We're going to begin today with two topics. You remember each of my three talks deal with two topics, 6 topics in all. And the first one dealt with Hans Christian Andersen and Peter the Great. And now we go to Catherine the Great and Alfred Nobel and the Nobel Prizes. And on the third C-Day, that will be my last series of talks. And that is the day that I will talk about the fall of the House of Romanov and also the Nobel Sperm Bank. Now, I mentioned this the other day, and it's been on TV, and several of you have stopped me in the hallway and asked for more information, and I've been awful. I've been very cruel because I'm giving out no information at all because I want you all to come on the last day, and we'll talk about the Nobel Sperm Bank. So if it's of interest to you and it's a fun topic, please come on the 3rd, and that would be my last C-Day. We go now to Catherine the Great. Catherine the Great created a world-class museum. She had 3 children by 3 different lovers, a Swedish military officer, a Polish count who would go on to become the King of Poland, and a Russian military hero who would give her one of the world's great diamonds as a token of his affection. She has been called sexually voracious by one of her biographers, and Catherine did not confine her interest to just the upper echelons of the military. If she saw a handsome young guard, for example, she might say, in effect, clean him up and bring him to my tent. And if he was quite satisfactory, he would get a promotion and a choice assignment. And if he was not, off you go, young man, to Siberia. She seized the throne from her husband, Peter III, in a coup with assistance from the military and the clergy, and she was complicit in her husband's death. Peter the Great defined Russia as the place where things that can happen, happen. You can't make this stuff up. Russian history is better than fiction. Catherine was brought from Germany at the age of 14. Her German name was Sophia, and she was to be readied for marriage to Peter, who was also born in Germany. They were both German. And then Peter would go on to become the Tsar of Russia, but only for a very brief time. Peter was childish. He liked to play with toy soldiers and puppets. He spent a lot of time training his dogs, and he liked to drink. It would be a few years before they married in 1745, when she was 16 and he was 17. On the wedding night with Catherine, he came to bed hours after her, dead drunk. On other occasions, he brought toy soldiers to the bedroom to play with, and that's about the only play that took place in the bedroom. Nothing else happened that night or thereafter, and since the basic biological act that produces children was missing, there were none. Catherine would later write in her diary that he was an idiot. The fly in the ointment was the Empress Elizabeth. She was the daughter of Peter the Great, and she was an aunt to Peter, who would become Peter the Third. She was impatient about producing heirs. You know, among the royalty, your job is to get those boys coming out. And so she sanctioned an affair between Catherine and a Swedish military officer. This produced a son, Paul. And Elizabeth made it clear to all that this was the product of Catherine and Peter. Then the Empress took the son from her at birth on the birthing bed, took the son from her and raised him on her own, and Catherine was to have no say in this. She was forbidden to have contact with her son. There was a second child, a girl, by the name of Anna, who would only live for 2 years. Her father was a Polish count, and this gentleman at the time was an aide to the British ambassador to Russia. He would go on, as I said, to become King of Poland. And once again, Elizabeth took control of this second child, forbidding Catherine access to her. This was another affair that was sanctioned by Elizabeth, and Elizabeth was no shirker in the affairs department herself. She had a great number of them, but she never married and she had no children. It may have been because men were intimidated by the daughter of Peter the Great. Meanwhile, Peter's still hanging around, having little interest in anything except drinking. And Elizabeth, by this time, must be wondering, why did I bring this fool to Russia? He is certainly not interested in Catherine, whom he largely ignores. It is said that his problem was a physical genital deformity. And this is corrected one night when he gets drunk, and his mates lay him out on a table and call in a doctor. And apparently this worked very well because he then began to take on mistresses. And Catherine now is threatened that he will divorce her, get thee to a nunnery. You remember the tradition at the time of divorce among the Russian royals was to banish the woman to a convent, close the doors, and never be heard from again. That was, in effect, the divorce. So she was afraid this was going to happen to her, and especially because Peter was fooling around with a favorite lady in waiting. Meanwhile, Catherine is having an affair with Grigory Orlov, a Russian military hero, and she is pregnant for the third time now with his child. He presents Catherine with one of the great diamonds of the world, known as the Orlov diamond, and this little puppy weighs in at about 190 carats, And it is currently down in the Kremlin in a diamond collection that is held there. So Orlov helps Catherine cement favor with the military, and he will become a critical link in Catherine's rise to power. Elizabeth dies in early 1762, January of 1762, and Peter acts foolishly at the funeral. He is shedding mock tears and wiping them on her burial robes. He offended everyone. He becomes Peter III. He's now the supreme ruler of Russia. God help the Russians. He could write a book on how to lose the crown in 6 months or less. You remember he liked to play with toy soldiers. He now has real ones to play with. He cedes land back to Prussia, a hated enemy of Russia. This is the land that Russia has held for generations. He dresses the military in Prussian-style uniforms. He now has the military hating him, not a good idea for a ruler. He wants German instead of French spoken in the court. If you were here the other day, you remember that Peter the Great decreed, after he came back from Europe, that the official language of the Russian court would be French, and that has been so until this time. And so he wants to overturn that tradition and have German, his native language, spoken in the royal court. He reverts back to Lutheranism, the religion of his childhood, when Russian Orthodoxy, of course, was the major religion. And he offended everyone he could. He had no tact. He had no common sense. There are rumors, now he's the Tsar, and there are rumors that he is imminently ready to divorce Catherine, leaving her with nothing. So the Orlov brothers, there were 5 of them. Grigory was her lover, 4 brothers to Grigory. And they were all military men, and they were all loyal to Catherine.